May you hear us now?
Take two.
Who was that texted
Stephanie.
you?
Stephanie, thank you for watching.
Yeah.
Telling us that you couldn't hear.
Not hearing, but watching.
She comments a lot.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
So, I hope you
Some old
enjoyed
stuff.
watching our mouths move.
Blah, 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 blah.
But we're gonna try this again. Again, Stephanie, thank you for letting us know. See, that's how much the devil doesn't want this message to be out.
It's a big deal.
So thanks again. Thanks for being here with us. We are talking about a word that is very, very hard. Something that is very, very hard for, I would say, all of us. If it's easy for you, I'd love to see your comments in the live, because we need to know your tricks. But we'll start by saying that this isn't an easy topic. This one carries a lot of weight for a lot of people. Today we're going to talk about, or we are talking about, forgiveness. Specifically forgiveness in the context of people and relationships that may have hurt you deeply and may not be safe for you to return to. If you've ever been told by a well-meaning person, by a church, by someone in a recovery community that you have to forgive someone in order to truly heal, and that forgiving them means letting them back in your life, I want you to hear this from us today. That is not what forgiveness means. And that teaching, however well-intentioned it is, has caused genuine harm to real people. So today we're going to sit with a more complete, more honest, ultimately a more freeing version of what forgiveness actually is. The scripture verse that we're going to use as our foundation today is Romans 12:18, which says, "If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone." So I want you to notice two things about this verse before we go any further. First, if it's possible, he says. Paul doesn't say it's always possible. He acknowledges that peace with every person in every situation may not be achievable. Second, as far as it depends on you, he says. Your responsibility is your side, not theirs. You're called to do what you can from where you stand. You're not called to manufacture peace in a relationship where the other person has not made it safe to do so. So today we're going to talk about what forgiveness actually is and what it is not. So Jessica, I know you did it so well to start with. Let's try one more time.
Said
Just
so many words.
Clarify for us some of those myths that are out there regarding forgiveness.
Okay, so there are a few very widespread isms, myths about forgiveness. And so I was very glad that I got this part because I'm kind of a stickler for a few of these things. So the first one is that forgiveness means that what happened was okay. No, it does not. Forgiveness is not a statement of the severity or of the impact of what was done. It does not excuse what happened. It does not minimize what happened. And you can forgive someone while still being very clear that what they did was wrong. That it hurt you, that it had consequences, all of the above. Forgiveness does not rewrite your memories, but it does release your grip on the debt that you feel that you're owed. Forgiveness requires the other person to ask for it. Again, no, it does not. They don't even have to acknowledge it. They don't even have to know that it happened. Forgiveness is an internal act, so it happens inside of you. It's something that you do for yourself, regardless if the other person is aware of it, is present for it, is sorry for what they did, or if they're even living anymore. Some of the most important acts of forgiveness happen in rooms where only one person is sitting. The person who harmed you does not have to participate in your forgiveness. Release yourself. This is a big one. Forgiveness and reconciliation are the same thing. Absolutely not. This particular myth causes a lot of damage, especially in my opinion, to people in recovery. So please hear me when I say forgiveness and reconciliation are two very different things. So forgiveness is unilateral. That means it only takes me, and I choose to do it on my own. Reconciliation is bilateral, which means it takes two people. You both have to be willing. You both have to be doing the work, and I would say 9 times out of 10, you have to have noticeably, which means you kind of do have to care what other people see, hear, say about you, because you have to have exhibited, I think both people would have to exhibited a tremendous amount of change internally in their environment, all of the above, like noticeably changed before reconciliation is possible. You cannot reconcile alone. Like, I can't reconcile mine and Tori's relationship by myself. If she's not participating in the reconciliation, it's just not happening. You're just punishing yourself. And it's also very, very important, no matter how much somebody pressures you, other people, the person who has harmed you, no matter what, you should never reconcile with someone who puts you or your recovery at risk. What I say last time? Red zone. Don't do it. Another thing that you hear is, well, if you wouldn't still be mad if you really forgive me, or you wouldn't still say that I hurt you if you forgive me. That is also not true. Forgiveness is not an absence of emotion. It is a decision that doesn't always require the emotions to cooperate immediately. You can make the decision to forgive. The feeling of forgiveness comes later. And what have we talked about before? Facts aren't feelings. You could be actively forgiving someone and not feel that you're doing it, but that doesn't mean that you are. So feeling those emotions doesn't mean that the forgiveness isn't happening. It just means that you're human and that you have emotions and that what happened to you was real, and that it still is having a consequence. It's still having an effect in your life. So the fifth one is that forgiveness is something that you do one time and then it's done. False. I liken forgiveness to surrender. Sometimes it's day by day, sometimes it's hour by hour, sometimes it's minute by minute. There have been times when something might be really new and really raw for me, and I will have to over and over tell myself, I forgive them, I forgive them, I forgive them, even if everything about me emotionally is like, ugh, like my brain, like it has to start somewhere, and sometimes it's a practice. You have to practice it before you get it. For most significant wounds, it's probably going to take a little bit longer, but it's a decision that you come to the conclusion more than one time. Like, forgiveness is not just a fleeting thing. Your feelings are going to resurface. Your anger is going to resurface. The hurt's going to resurface. The grief is going to resurface. Triggers reopen things. Healing is not linear for anybody. Everybody heals differently. So each time you return to the decision to release something, to forgive someone rather than to hold on to it, it's not because you're failing at forgiveness. It's because it's a continuous, ongoing work. Nothing we're doing here is, we're not rocket sciencing forgiveness. We're kind of myth busting, the isms that you hear when you're on your own healing journey and something may come up about another person. The first thing people kind of want to do is like you need to forgive them. And that, that may be true, but that looks different for everybody. The way I forgive somebody is completely different from the way Tori forgives somebody, or Joanne, or Christy. The way I forgive you is that I love you, but stay away from me. But that's not true for everybody. So, hi. So for people in recovery, these myths can genuinely become a threat to your sobriety because it puts pressure on you to engage in relationships that are unsafe, and unsafe relationships are one of, if not the most reliable path right back to using. So, take it away, Bob.
That's good stuff. A lot of good stuff. You got anything on that?
So I think when we have a hard time forgiving somebody, it's because if we withhold forgiveness, we are waiting on them to pay us a debt that they can't pay.
Right.
Like what they've done, the damage they've done is not usually anything they can pay back. But it's hard. I think it's very important that you release them from that debt, but it's probably not always even healthy that you forget what they done. I mean, they did that, but they can't pay you back for it. So you have to kind of keep them.
Yeah. I think that goes to, kind of a little bit of what was said earlier is your forgiveness is not dependent on their response or their behavior. And they may not even be safe for you, to pursue any kind of relationship past just that forgiveness within you toward that person.
Yeah.
So, what happens or does it happen? Is it when peace isn't even possible? Is that a real thing?
That is a real thing, and probably very often that's a real thing. I think often reconciliation with certain people, you have to really examine whether that's safe, and not just safe in a physical sense, but safe for your physical, your emotional, and your spiritual walk. Because this is where a lot of people in recovery get stuck, and where a lot of well-meaning religious advice causes real harm. There are relationships where a person who hurt you has not changed, where the behavior that was destructive is still present, where returning to closeness or even regular contact would put your recovery in direct risk. These may be family members, they may be people that you love deeply. It may be people who are also suffering in their own way, but none of that changes the fact that proximity to them in this season is dangerous for you. Romans, was it 12:18?
Yeah.
It uses the language, it says, when possible. So that tells you that, definitely a lot of times that's not possible. There's a kind of pressure that exists in faith communities and sometimes in recovery communities to restore relationships at any cost, to be the bigger person, to go back, give another chance, and sometimes that pressure comes from genuinely loving people who believe deeply in redemption and who want to see things made right. The restoration's not possible when both. A lot of times it's not possible where both people stand at that particular time. I found for myself that people in my past, when so much damage was being done, as much my fault as anybody else's fault, but very few of those people are still, I'm not harboring that unforgiveness, but those people are not still active participants in my current life. And I think that's what's the healthiest, probably for them as much as myself. You're not required to give access to someone who's not demonstrated change. You're not required to rebuild trust with somebody that's broken it repeatedly. You're not required to place your recovery, your physical, emotional, or spiritual well-being in the hands of someone that's not earned, that you don't know you can trust with those things. It's especially true in cases of abuse, active addiction in the other person, patterns of manipulation that's not been addressed. Forgiveness in these contexts is an internal act of release. It's not an invitation to resume contact. It's not a signal that boundaries are no longer necessary, and it's not proof that you're finally over it. Paul's instruction in Romans 12:18 is paired with profound humility as far as it depends on you. So that, the part of it that you can control, you're responsible for. You're not responsible for their part. You can't control whether that person makes reconciliation possible. You're not responsible for a peace that requires their participation to exist. And that's where I said, forgiving them, that don't mean you have to just pretend that those things never happened. Protecting yourself from an unsafe relationship is not the opposite of forgiveness. It can be one of the clearest expressions. because it keeps you healthy enough to actually do the work of releasing rather than re-injuring, re-injuring that old wound.
Yeah.
So you can release it, but then you really, I think it's very important, especially when you forgive, that you keep that boundary so that you don't have to keep forgiving the same thing over and over and over and taking, the hurt and the wound that goes with the damage.
Yeah, and I think we often mistake forgiveness with healing. And they're two different things.
Definitely.
I can forgive, but if I bring that toxic relationship or subject myself back to that person that hurt me, then that challenges that forgiveness. The forgiveness is for peace, and that's what he's calling us to, is to have peace. But keeping someone at arm's distance is okay, because there's great potential. You can forgive someone and they come back in your life, and while maybe that original hurt didn't repeat itself, but something else did, it's going to bring that injury back to life, and so you're back in that. So I think it's important to understand that forgiveness is not healing, they're not the same thing.
I think too, you can connect that with, I think it's step 9, where it says, you become willing to make amends whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Well, I'm others. And so, a lot of times for me, what gives me peace is, well, I love you, I forgive you, but, and that's, it's like Joanne said, that's probably what's best for everybody in the situation,
Yeah.
Like, it's a very delicate, especially when people are like, well, they're different now, you should,
You have to I talked to Emily a lot about this. You have to be very mindful and on your toes at all times, every single person that you give access to you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, you have to be, like, you can't just blunder through, and whoever happens along, let them have access to your feelings and your emotions. You have to purposefully be like, is this going to be healthy for me?
Right. Agree.
guard your heart.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So that leads into differences in internal release and external access. So there's a difference there.
Yeah, so I'd like to elaborate on some things that Jess was saying, because she was talking about reconciliation. Well, I guess everybody's kind of talked about it, but the internal release is the forgiveness. The external access is not the same thing. So forgiveness is an act of internal release, and reconciliation is an act of external access. You can do the first without doing the second. In many situations, the first actually requires you to not do the second. With like resentment, as the old saying goes, it's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to get sick. Internal release is the act of putting the cup down. Like, have you ever carried a bag and put a bunch of rocks in it and just kept adding those rocks in there? Eventually you get so heavy you can't move. And so when we get to that place, we might wonder, what is that? Why am I so heavy? You're carrying unforgiveness and you're carrying resentment. And so I think, for me, something that I think I've struggled with throughout my entire life is like waiting for that person to get better or do something different for me to forgive them. Forgiveness does not require you to see them be better or do different. Forgiveness is for you, it's not for them. It is literally just for you. We don't, God says that the amount of forgiveness we receive is how much we give, and so if it's so important for Him to note on that, then how important is it for us to actually receive that and walk in that? To release your grip on justice and trust that you do not have to be the one to collect it. yeah, and so when I read that, it took me back to when God says, "Vengeance is mine," says the Lord, and so it's like, that's in Deuteronomy 32:35. So if vengeance is truly God's, what do we do? Well, we have to sit back. We have to rest in that. We have to release to Him the things that are not ours. So if it's His, it's not ours. It can't be both, and so, to do a swap, I choose forgiveness. I give you control. I choose release. I give it to God. Who are you releasing that to? Well, I'm not just releasing it into thin air. Like, I know the one who is in control, and so that makes that a little bit easier. What were you gonna say?
Basically, that makes me think, and we're talking about a scripture that is misused, and so that brought to mind another scripture that is often misused, and that's an eye for an eye.
Yeah.
We've had it ingrained in our head. It's like, okay, an eye for an eye. You hurt me, I'm gonna hurt you. Except, for me, it's like, I'm gonna hurt you worse. I'm going to be one step further, or one cut deeper.
Yeah.
And again, it just brought to that, and it goes back to some of the things that Pastor Sam's been talking about, that tradition, those things that are ingrained in our head, bad habits. We've stood on scriptures in the wrong context, and we've, on top of that, in our addiction, we've learned how to cope and navigate life so wrong. And you got to come out of, because when you're in your addiction, you cling to those wrong truths.
Yeah.
And so it's retraining your mind, retraining your heart also.
Yeah.
So that just
I like that.
I think a big thing for me is that the parable of the unforgiving servant, because in one of the translations, the king says to take the man and to turn him over to the tormentors. Like, some versions say the jailers, but one of them says the tormentors, and it's like, you're giving yourself, you're tormenting yourself by harboring unforgiveness. The other person, 9 times out of 10, like, doesn't even give it a second thought. Like, they're not walking around like, oh God, you don't forgive me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, we're carrying it.
Yeah, and so it's just, there's so much scripturally about it. It's just,
And the people who have treated us that way and done all of this damage, even more than not thinking on whether we forgive them, they most often don't even take accountability for what they've done.
Yeah.
Like, to them, it's all you and the wrong, and you have to just release that too. Like,
I was saying, even when they do, it doesn't always satisfy us.
you have to just release it.
So we've talked about internal release, and so a little bit about external access. So it's a completely different category. It is about the amount of access you give to somebody after the forgiveness. It's about what you let into your life, your space, your recovery. It just says a whole lot. Like, what kind of boundaries am I setting? My boundaries today look different than my boundaries 6 years ago. My boundaries 6 years ago said, I'm still really sick, and I will pretty much just let whatever walk into my life. But I started to learn when I got out of jail, what those looked like. And so that looked like, I love you, but I love me more. That looked like, I protect my peace today. That looked like cutting off certain relationships with people because I needed peace, because that's how I live, and I was so used to that peace that it's hard to give it up now, and so I didn't feel bad as much as I used to about saying, hey, I'm just not really into the chaos, I need my peace, I didn't feel as bad when I said, hey, that really hurt me. I don't think that we can work this out. And even today, my boundaries are even more different, where my values lie, where my beliefs lie, that is something that, yes, I can forgive you, but I'm not going to crumble and join you where you are. And so internal release says, I choose not to let what they did define my present. I choose not to carry the weight of this every day. I release them from the debt in my own heart, but external access says that release does not mean they are safe to be around right now. It does not mean I owe them my trust, my time, or my proximity. Those are separate conversations. And so just guarding your heart, I think, like Jessica said or Joanne Warren said, we really have to guard our heart, and it's okay. And it takes practice. I don't always get it right. I'm sure none of us always get the boundaries and, protecting our external access that we give to people, but we're practicing, and so don't feel bad for practicing those boundaries. Don't feel bad when it's time to, release those things to God, but, at the end of the day, God, I release that person to you too. Like, that's your child. You deal with them. I don't have to. That's okay to say that. I don't know that I'd say that to them, but, you're okay to feel that way on the inside.
I like that. I don't owe you my proximity.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, I mean,
Stay away from me.
yeah,
That's good stuff.
yeah, it was good.
So forgiveness is super emotional. I mean, it's a very emotional experience. Whether you're harboring unforgiveness or you're feeling the freedom of forgiveness, the emotions of forgiveness are complex, but there's so many different types of forgiveness. You can forgiving someone you love who hurt you is not the same emotional experience as forgiving a stranger.
Yeah.
Forgiving someone who abused you is not the same as forgiving someone who disappointed you.
Mm-mm.
Forgiving someone who is still alive and possibly still doing harm is different from forgiving someone who is gone. Forgiving someone who has genuinely changed and is trying different from forgiving someone who has never acknowledged what they did, which goes to what you spoke to, Joanne. I mean, there's so many emotional levels and there's so many varieties of forgiveness. You're allowed to love someone and also need distance from them. So there's your proximity. Both can be true. You're allowed to forgive someone and still grieve what the relationship was and what it could have been and what it will not ever be. You're allowed to feel anger even long after you thought you'd processed something. Anger sometimes resurfaces because a new layer of understanding has arrived. So that's kind of what we were talking about earlier. You can have some forgiveness there, but that doesn't mean you healed. It may just take re-exposure to that person to bring back alive some of that anger. Because now you're capable of seeing the full weight of something, where earlier in your life, earlier in your recovery, you could only see partially. So you're allowed to feel relief and sadness in the same moment. Relief that you are no longer in that relationship, and sadness that the relationship became something that required you to leave it. Those feelings are not contradictions. They are honest. They're the honest shape of a complicated loss. You're allowed to not be ready yet. Forgiveness isn't a performance that you owe anybody on any particular timeline.
Yep.
If the wound is still raw, if the grief is still fresh, if the safety is not yet established in your own interior life, then you are in the process. And being in the process is not the same as refusing to forgive. It's an honest human pace of healing. So what I want you to resist is the pressure to perform forgiveness before it is real. Don't declare forgiveness that lives only on the surface. That's only produced by pressure rather than genuine interior work. This does not free you. So you can be working toward release and still have a closed door. You can have a closed door and still be moving toward peace in your own interior. You can love someone from a distance. You can grieve a relationship and still be healing. You can be complicated about this and still be doing it right. The scripture says, if it is possible, As far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do what you can from where you are on your side of the verse, and that's enough. And so really that's all that verse is asking of you. If the forgiveness work feels like too much to carry alone, and sometimes it genuinely is. Again, like we ended last week, reach out to someone to help carry that. Find a counselor, a trusted person in your recovery to walk through these real emotions, to find freedom and peace that true forgiveness gives you. Anybody else got anything? That's good stuff. That's a hard one.
Yeah.
Super.
Well, and I think when you get to a point that you realize that, you know, in the dysfunction, people use forgiveness kind of as a manipulation tool or as a weapon. Like, are you ever going to forgive me? Or I can never forgive you. And it's like, it's become such a diluted, superficial thing, and so far from what spiritually, scripturally it is meant to be. That was a game changer for me, and realizing, you know, the myths and things like that. Like, I can be mad at you but still be forgiving you. I can forgive you and not let you in my life because you're a danger to me. But I don't hold any resentment for those people. You know, I wouldn't let you get hit by a car
Right.
if I could stop a car.
Right.
You know what I mean? But I mean, I'm not going to go out of my way to invite that into my life. But at the same time, I'm not going to keep myself sick by still allowing whatever wrongs have been done to me to live in my head and separate me from my Father, because that's all it does. When I don't forgive you, it separates me from Him.
That's right.
And that's just
Not forgiving is
not allowed.
letting yourself pay the price for somebody else's
Yep.
actions.
Yep. So,
That's good.
Very good. Thanks again for being with us. Take good care of yourself. If you need prayer, leave a heart in the comments. We would love to pray for you. If you have any questions, comments, or even topics you would like for us to talk about, we would love to have those as well. Otherwise, we hope you have a great end to your week, and we will see you next week. Bye.